Yes, this is fine. Go ahead, please.
All right. So thanks a lot. Thank God for this invitation to share my experience, which is essentially on experience on export permit application approval and the access and benefit sharing landscape in Nigeria. And this is about my experience so far. So I would focus my talk around this, where I'll have a disclaimer, and then ABS Nagoya Protocol, ABS Nigeria Framework, ABS Export Control Matters, and then the others as I've shown on these slides. So on the disclaimer, I want to specifically say that I am not a representative of the Federal Ministry of Environment. So this presentation is an account of personal experience from the application of export permit with the Federal Ministry of Environment. And that the presentation exclusively applies to situations where genetic resources leave national and continental borders. And just a recent discussion with Thank God, and who had shared with me that there was a communication between the Federal Ministry of Environment, that's the ABS focal contact, and the African BP management, which reveals that permits may not be needed, or the MTA, which is Material Transfer Agreement, may not be needed where research is 100% carried out in the country. Are you with me, everyone?
Yes, please carry on.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Now, access and benefit sharing and the Nagoya Protocol, you all are familiar with this matter, especially that the Nagoya Protocol is an international ABS instrument that provides the international legal context for ABS, and that this is implemented at national levels through domestic regulations and competent authorities, and many more other issues that is available online with respect to access and benefits and the Nagoya Protocol. But here, talking about the access and benefits sharing and the Nigeria framework, it is benefit framework is implemented through the National Environmental Regulation, which is enshrined in the Federal Republic of Nigeria official gazetted document, and as displayed a section of it for you. This document is available online, and you could always access it anytime individuals want. And that the Federal Ministry of Environment, especially the Department of Forestry in the Federal Ministry of Environment, has been very instrumental in handling matters that has to do with the access and benefit sharing, especially with respect to export permits and for the country. The National Focal Contact Person for Access and Benefit Sharing and Export Permit Application is, as displayed here, Ahmed Labara, who is the Chief Scientific Officer responsible for the process that one has to go through if needs to obtain export permit or a material transfer agreement for their biological samples. Okay, so the Nagoya Protocol ensures fair and equitable sharing of benefit arising from their utilization to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And this is usually documented where you have parties involved, countries, maybe collaborators, and the terms and conditions are always put in paper so that each party will be familiar with what is expected of them, and that what at that given time the government wants to be occurring. But the question then is, why is access and benefit important, especially the export permit and the restrictions that are there for each country. And it's because there's the need to protect biodiversity and indigenous knowledge, as well as national sovereignty over genetic resources, and also to manage biosafety and biosecurity risk and meet international obligations. And of course, important to encourage local resource capacity and reduce export of biological resources, especially the African BP is very much into this and ensuring that all things are done within the country in this respect. But just to give you a quick background of the project that led to the request for export permits in the case of my experience. So in 2011, I became a PhD student at the University of Oslo, and where I was expected to collect some samples for my thesis. And then I started, by nature of the project I was to do, had to collect sperm and blood samples from different locations in Nigeria. At the same time, collaborate with some other partners in Cameroon to collect quite a number of samples which I'm to use for this project. So essentially, I was looking at the evolution of sperm competition and sperm evolution in African birds, but the focus is in Nigeria, where I had to sample species of birds from Nigeria and then also from other countries. And at the same time, I was interested in the DNA barcoding of birds in West Africa. And of course, extending this beyond boundaries, looking at sub-Saharan Africa. So eventually, all of these require that I obtain permit for this. But initially, this was not before me. So, and that's where I just briefly talking about the export permit application and what's the motivation actually. In 2015, when I was about to publish one of the papers for my study group, it was the reviewer and editor of the Biological Journal of the Linnean Society that first raised ethical concern on the paper and that we submitted for that group. What were the issues? So he pointed out that he is not aware, because they were not put in the paper, any permit we had for ringing or trapping the birds. That's one. And then he also pointed out that there was no indication that we obtained sample export license. And of course, during the period I was collecting samples, coming to Nigeria from Oslo, going back, and then going with samples, I never had any export permit. The only thing I had with the sample were just a note from APLORI, who would always introduce me as a student who was working, who was studying at the University of Oslo, and that I needed these samples for my project. But then at the airport, I had custom officers as well who would look at the samples and they will only ask me, what's my status? And then I get myself at that corner where I have to make explanations that this is what I am. I'm a student here, and that these samples are from birds, and I want to use them for my project, and I'll be using them in the laboratory in Oslo. And after this talk, they would always pass me and allow me to go with the samples. And that's how I've done for 3 consecutive years that I have harvested samples from Nigeria. And of course, this is also the situation for many other scientists who have always had that opportunity, collect samples, and then they can leave the country with their countries with these samples without much checks on them. So that then led us to begin to think of we need a retroactive export permit for samples that we already had collected, and at the same time get a new permit for the new samples that have not been exported to Oslo. So the first permit I had was for the samples I already taken to Oslo, which was the retroactive permit that was obtained in 2015. And then this new one that I had in 2021 was the one I then had to use to lift the samples I had with me then to Oslo. Then what were the processes that I had to go through in the process of requesting the approval for export permits? One was I made contact with the focal persons at the Department of Forestry, Federal Ministry of Environment, and to discuss how I could go about this. And first point of the call was for me to apply and submit an application letter indicating my interest that I needed an export permit for samples. And alongside this, I was given a form, the ABS form. And the ABS form have its questions in there, which I need to fill in details. It was more like extracting the original proposal for the project and then putting bits and pieces based on the questions that they asked in that ABS form. So having filled those forms, I had to also include a complete list of species that I intend to, export the samples to the lab there. And then also the request of the Memorandum of Understanding with the University of Oslo, because I was from APLORI, AP Leventis Ontological Research Institute then, and then before I got the admission to the University of Oslo. So they were asking for Memorandum of Understanding between APLORI and then the University of Oslo, so it could be part of the processing. And then details of the stakeholders involved, the partners, collaborators, universities, and then for individuals involved, the CVs and means of identification of those individuals. In this case, the international passport was required. And my application was submitted 14th of November, 2020. And then that was it. So after the submission, I expected to hear back from the ministry, and then they got back to me around December, but then they would always want to request for additional information or seek clarifications where things put in the application was not clear. So having received that feedback from them on 1st of December, then it was for me just to clarify things and then formalize the payment of the fees for the permit, which I did following the year in 2021 and the 10th of February, thereabouts. So I paid the sum of this 100,698, and that was just the fee for the submission of the application and every other thing. After that, they received it, they acknowledged, and then it took a few weeks. They invited me for an interview. That's essentially meeting with the members and staff of the Department of Forestry. And why they invited me was for them to interview me so they know what I want to do with respect to the proposal for that project, and then also state the terms and conditions for granting the permits. So on the 4th of February, yes, I was there. That was before the payment of the fee. So there with the Department of Forestry and staff, the interview was conducted, and then they stated their conditions for me, which is mainly to train the staff. And then they will also visit the site for inspection. And then they want to look at the samples that are collected. If possible, they want me to do some demonstration in the lab of what I will be doing. And following all of those will be the intensive training of the staff that were delegated for my own case. So that was it at the conclusion from that meeting and interview. And thereafter, I scheduled the training of the staff. I'll give you a quick one when I pass the slide. And then after this process of training the staff, there will be the check and clarification from the Federal Ministry of Environment. It's just to provide what they request and nothing more. And this is just for them to make sure that they are on the same page with you and with the application you have made and with your project and every other thing. And as well as if you have met the requirement, fulfilling and training all the delegates, and the feedback the delegate also provide to ministry to work with in developing the export permit. After that, you have approval, and then you will be invited to come and sign the material transfer agreement, which is also including the export permit that you requested for. And this will be done right there with the permanent secretary and the legal practitioners within the ministry. And then you have your witness who is with you, and you all go together to do all of this signing. Once this is done, you'll be given a copy of the MTA, and which is the permit as well. And you go through to then use that and report back to the Federal Ministry of Environment. And that's why reporting is coming. And this can include maybe publications, a third-party transfer. If the samples you have exported, someone else indicated interest and want to use that, then you need to officially inform the Federal Ministry of Environment, because they claim ownership of these samples. And if there are cases of intellectual property rights, you also need to inform the ministry, and any other product that has arisen from the utilization of the samples you exported must always have to be communicated back to the Federal Ministry of Environment, as well as every other thing that you intend to do. So just to give a quick aside of what I've done, this is how the application I made was, but it's more comprehensive than this, but just to give you visualization of it, and which is always directed to the permanent secretary, the Federal Ministry of Environment, and then your attention, the Federal Director of Forestry of the ministry. And so thereafter, the ministry will give you back and invite you for an interview, as I discussed earlier, and this is always the letter they send to you. And in the meeting of interview and meeting with the department, this agenda is this is what the agenda will look like. Give you the opening, the self-introduction, the short brief by the acting director, then presentation by you, who is the applicant, and telling them about your proposed project, and then the further clarification on some of the gray areas that the staff, the Department of Forestry wants you to also talk more about. And most of the time, they'll ask you the benefit on conservation biology and on economic development of the country, adverse effect that the research may pass to the environment, or the modalities put together in place for benefit sharing arising from the utilization of the genetic resources as, as part of what they want to be built in the project. So that's just a quick one. So after that meeting, members, we had a group photograph with the staff, as you have here. And then this is just a receipt of the payment, the fees for the export permit, and they are very specific on the account you should pay this to, and they'll give you all of these details. Make sure you pay it directly to that account. If you pay to another account, you might end up paying another one again. And then for the training, I had this arranged for me to handle the training effectively. After the interview, we decided on the date of the training, then discussion with patrons. Then I made contact with resource person who helped with the training, and then procurement of materials, advert and publicity, invitation letters to participants, then reservation, accommodation, arrival of participant, training workshop head, then participant departure, all of this. So the budget for this were excluded from the fees paid. And then I made my schedules for the 3 days of the training, and this is what I covered with the resource persons I invited to also help in the training. So for that. And then after the training, these were just those on ground. We had a shot together, and members of the delegate from the Federal Ministry of Environment as well in this photo. And thereafter, they went back with the report and they developed the NTA, and which is what they got back to me after a few weeks. And this was on the 10th of May, 2021, to ask me to request me to represent the University of Oslo, and where I need to officially still make contact with them to give me that authorization and letter so I could stand in for them. And after this, they invited me to sign the NTA, and here we are. I got this on the 18th day of April, which is what is written there, but it was already signed on that day. So here is how I went through to get the export permit for me. And I believe that not many people are aware of this process, and this serves as an eye-opener for those who want to export samples out of the country so that they could have proper export permits that could protect them, as well as help ease the process of taking the samples out of the country to where they want to use it in the lab. And many other issues that I think were involved that I have not put together in this presentation that I will be available to discuss with people who will want to ask 1 or 2 questions. On this note, I'd like to thank you for listening, and thank you.